Hi, and welcome to Between the Rows. I'll be your host this week, Dave Bedard. This week, you're going to hear a bit of a sneak preview of a new multimedia project we've been working on here at Glacier FarmMedia. This project takes a closer look at the challenges facing farmers and breeders in preserving the world's genetics in both crops and livestock. In this case, how does a person's quest to breed the perfect chicken balance that drive for improved meat and egg production against preserving the genetic resources he found along the way?
We called them gene pools, and they were populations of, I think, maybe 100 females and 20 males that were just being maintained without selection or development in case they were ever needed.
Also, we've heard about buffer strips as a way to prevent soil loss, but they can also offer up a habitat for some valuable field workers.
They're great. They work on weekends, they work like statutory holidays, and all they ask for to do their job well is some food, place to stay, and us providing them with some really good snacks in our fields.
And Chicago oats futures seem to have been having a pretty good month, but given the limited size and scope of that particular futures market, it seems a pretty good month is in the eye of the beholder.
It's small volumes, and the small volumes can lead to some wilder price swings, but they keep it around because there are still people trading it.
All this and more is coming up on Between the Rows after this.
Part of being a farmer is being an accountant, and a mechanic, and a chemist. You have lots on the go. So FarmLink makes your grain marketing go further. We help you reach your financial goals with calculated sales decisions. No bias, just solutions and results. Plus, with our new app GrainFox, we bring every opportunity right to your fingertips. Literally. Start seeing the returns that'll get your family ahead. You've earned it. FarmLink. Your work is worth more. Get started at farmlinksolutions.ca.
Hello again. As I said right off the top of the show, the editorial staff here at Glacier FarmMedia have been working up a special multimedia project over the past several months. It's called Seeding the Future, and you'll be seeing links to it on our sites in the not-too-distant future. It takes a look from multiple angles at the costs and benefits of preserving the world's genetics in livestock as well as crops. And what you're going to hear right now is a segment prepared by Lisa Gunther of Canadian Cattlemen and Christy Nuds of Farmtario called The Secret of Starcross 288, a profile of the man now considered to be the godfather of modern poultry.
It's Europe in 1944. Donald Shaver is leading a tank squadron. But even in the midst of World War II, he's got chickens on the brain.
All the time I was away, when I was overseas, I was still getting the magazines sent to me, and I was in my tank thinking about it.
He started keeping chickens while he was at school.
That's Dr. Peter Hunton. Peter worked for Donald for 7 years before moving on to a career with the Ontario Ag Producers Marketing Board. Peter and Donald remained friends until Donald's death in 2018.
There was a vacant lot next to the house, and he had, I'm not sure, I think he had permission to put a little poultry house there, and he kept laying hens, and then he began in a very small way to breed them, and I think he became very enthusiastic.
This wasn't just some kid's hobby. Donald's laying hens showed real promise. When he was 15, they won a national egg laying contest. When he enlisted, he left his stock with a friend in Long Island. But those plans went awry.
And when I was in Rome, Italy, in 1944, I got a letter from him saying the plant had burned down, so all the stock was lost. That in itself was a good thing, because I was forced to restart and go for new genetic material. And I managed to persuade many old, well-known breeders to sell me pure lines. That's the thing that wasn't widely done at the time, because they didn't want to create competitors.
That was a pivotal moment. Many people would have given up on the business of birds, but not Donald Shaver. He not only rebuilt his stocks, he improved them in a big way. And you can't help wondering if losing those birds helped inspire a passion for conserving genetics throughout his career. More on that later. The war shaped Donald's life in other ways too. He talked about standing in his tank, taking in the devastation, and wondering how the world would rebuild. That made him realize that his business could be international in scope. And he learned from working with his fellow soldiers too. What was Donald Shaver like as a person? His friend Peter describes him as follows.
He was extremely quiet-spoken, very low-key to listen to, but he was extremely knowledgeable. He was self-taught in almost everything in business, and he was no slouch in science, even though he had no post-secondary education. By the time he died, he had 3 honorary doctorates.
A 1964 article from Maclean's describes him as follows. His defeats and his success have their genesis in the fact that he was once a major in the Tank Corps and seldom forgets it. His low, white, red-roofed chicken hatchery and 2 chicken breeding farms near the little Ontario city of Galt are his headquarters. His general manager, an ex-serviceman like most Shaver staffers, is his GI. Peter says that Donald worked nearly 24/7. Soon, Shaver poultry breeding farms had branches all over the world. By 1960, 80% of sales were exports. The Maclean's article noted that Donald traveled the world 3 times in 18 months. In fact, he traveled so much that when he sat down at a theater, he automatically reached for his seatbelt.
But he kept in charge while he was away. We didn't have email that time, but we had telex. And he would telex the farm managers and anybody else who was doing things to tell them what to do or what they had done wrong. So he was a tough guy to work for.
Whatever you may think of his management style, Donald was a major influence in the poultry industry. He survived the post-war consolidation, which saw over 100 other poultry breeders in Ontario vanish. Chickens and turkeys changed dramatically in those years too. In the early part of the 20th century, chickens were raised both for their eggs and meat. Then poultry breeders started developing more specialized birds, suited either for egg laying or meat production. Egg layers produced more and more eggs. Meat birds grew faster, with more breast meat, to satisfy consumer demand. That meant more meat and eggs at a lower price for consumers. This has led to some unintended consequences, such as leg problems in meat birds and turkey. But breeders have been working to offset those issues through selection over the last 30 years. Donald saw success with his meat birds, but he's probably best known for an egg layer known as the Star-Crossed 288. The Star-Crossed 288 became the most widely used layer in the world. It won the USDA Poultry Tribute Award several times, and Donald received a congratulatory letter from Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson. Even while developing these high-producing strains, Donald was doing something else too.
He was always a conserver. When I first joined the company, in fact, my baptism of fire was involved in reproducing about 20 different strains, none of which was currently involved in the commercial crosses. We called them gene pools, and they were populations of, I think, maybe 100 females and 20 males that were just being maintained without selection or development in case they were ever needed. And that was pretty forward-looking.
Part of Donald's interest in those older strains was due to hybrid vigor. Hybrid vigor is a biological phenomenon that applies to crops and livestock. Basically, when you cross two pure lines, the hybrid offspring will be healthier and more vigorous, assuming the parents are any good. This was part of the reason the Star-Crossed 288 was such a superstar. But why keep older strains or breeds you're not using in your breeding program? After all, that costs money, and it does take time. Well, they are useful for research, and they're a sort of insurance policy. For more on that, see this story on the University of Alberta's Heritage Chicken Program. Once Donald retired, he donated his older strains to universities, including the University of Alberta and the University of Guelph. But he didn't stop there.
He told me that he was really concerned at the absence of any program in Canada and in many other countries, the absence of any program aimed at conserving farm animal genetics in a formal way.
Donald and Peter worked together on a national foundation to preserve farm animal genetics. It included people representing many livestock sectors. After a lot of persistence and political pressure, they were able to get a lab set up in Saskatoon. Today, the Canadian Animal Genetic Resources Lab stores frozen semen from farm animals ranging from bovines to chickens, as well as some embryos. An October 2019 Western Producer article noted that they can even collect semen from dead animals. So things have advanced. But the same article also notes that the greatest genetic loss appears to be in chickens. That makes any efforts to preserve what's left all the more important.
You've been listening to The Secret of Star-Crossed 288, prepared by Lisa Gunther and Christy Nuds for a Glacier Farm Media special project called Seeding the Future. You're listening to Between the Rows. I'm your host this week, Dave Bedard. A lot about the idea of buffer strips as part of a conservation system to help catch and prevent soil runoff and erosion on farmland, but they can also offer up some interesting opportunities to help the rest of the field meet its full potential. Here's Farmtario contributor Matt McIntosh in conversation with Jennifer Dolman. She's a farmer, agronomist, and beekeeper at Renfrew County in southeastern Ontario.
All right, we're here with Jen Dolman today. We're back in Eastern Ontario in Renfrew County, and we got some interesting stuff going on. We're looking at some buffer strips and pest management and some different strategies as it pertains to insects. So Jen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate being here. It's kind of neat while we're talking. I'm watching the bumblebees moving around, so it's very inspiring.
Let's maybe just start with just maybe tell us kind of where you are, what we're looking at, and really what kind of the role is of this buffer strip that you're standing in.
Okay, so Renfrew County has a lot of marginal ground and a lot of great farmland. And I have been a farmer for 15 years and an agronomist for 13 years, and now a beekeeper for 4 years because of neonics. So for me, I always knew buffer strips were really important when it came to like water quality and soil erosion, but I hadn't really realized how important it was for beneficials. So the buffer strips are really those parts of your farm that are not yet working at maximum potential, because if you haven't intentionally put a buffer strip in place to help support your natural predators, you're missing out on some great opportunities. So the buffer strips are those parts of your farm that the sprayer can't quite get in tight to, so you have a lot of burdocks growing. Anything edge of field, they're very good for neighbor relations as well, so you have less worry about risk. Anytime you can, have really any parts of our farms that when I'm looking at the yield monitor or I'm scouting fields and I'm not seeing consistent regular yields, it makes me start to wonder, maybe we should be retiring some of this and putting it into a buffer strip, because then I'm not putting inputs there. And I'm also creating habitat for some of my most important staff, which are my beneficials. They're great. They work on weekends, they work like statutory holidays, and all they ask for to do their job well is some food, place to stay, and us providing them with some really good snacks in our fields.
So when we're talking about buffer strips or trying to figure out where they might actually fit in the field in terms of like an area that's underproducing or it's something like that, are there any kind of general strategies you can use aside from maybe a yield count? Maybe you don't have a yield monitor or something like that. What are some other strategies you can use to try and establish whether or not an area could be transformed into something different?
Well, there's a few different strategies. One is go through and actually look at your fields right now, either in person, or you can do a lot even just with Google Maps. Or ideally, I always like it that you've got a decision maker covering the field at least 2 to 3 times a season. Like, we hire scouts, we hire custom sprayers, all this other stuff, but you can have a decision maker in that field and just look and see, where is it really thin? Where do you have weeds coming? Like, where really do you have problems? And that's really a good place to start. And then there's different strategies. So an area that the sprayer never gets to, you can invest in some nice things like vetch or crimson clover, sweet clover, something that, can actually handle a little bit of Roundup. You don't want to be spraying Roundup in there, but it's not something where you have to go and replant every year then. Anywhere at my place where the burdocks take over, that's public enemy number one, because they're just so invasive. But anytime you see the weeds creeping into the fields, the bared off knolls, it needs to be something that works for your system. There's no sense spending a lot of money on a cover crop seed that the custom sprayer is going to take out, right? So what you really need to do is find something that fits your goals and fits your budget. But I'm always a big fan of, honestly, one of the cheapest seeds around is sweet clover. It's incredibly tough. It seeds itself back down again. And it is really one of the best things for pollinators and for beneficials, because it blooms all season long. It grows about waist high. So, you don't necessarily want it where you've got a high traffic area. That's better for things like red clover or white clover, or if you want to get into some exotics, things like Phacelia. But at the same time, these are great because they don't necessarily need to be mowed. Grasses are wonderful, but grasses do need to be maintained. Otherwise, they kind of suffocate out themselves. So grasses are good, but I'm always a big fan of anything that can have a flower, because it not only gives the pollinators, which are obviously, for me as a beekeeper, I love, but really the native pollinators are what's keeping a lot of our system in balance. So they need the nectar they need. The nectar provides the energy, it's the carb, and then the pollen is actually the protein. And so it's actually feeding things that are helping your crop as well, not just, the honeybees, for example. So for those buffer strips, start with the areas where you've got the biggest problems, because really, what have you got to lose? If you can evaluate and see, okay, I'm spending, this many hundreds of dollars an acre on this. Yes, you do have to still make the mortgage payments or pay the rent on that ground. Sometimes when it's rental, you can maybe have a conversation with your landlord and say, hey, listen, this isn't producing. And I know we both share a common value of good environmental stewardship. So if we turn this into pollinator habitat, this might be a really good opportunity for you to know that you're giving back. And maybe you can even get the landlord to help pay for that. But you have to have a good relationship, or you're showing the landlord how you're investing in their ground. Again, it depends on that relationship. And I'm not in an area with a conservation authority, but I do have a lot of friends that are. And sometimes the conservation authorities will provide pollinator or buffer strip seed, or have programs that you can apply for it and have some of that subsidized. And this way, it's not just farmers having to care for this. Like, we get the benefit by having the pollinators here, but we're also providing habitat for a lot of other species that are important for our whole ecosystem. And it's nice to make it so that we're just not the only ones having to care for that.
That makes sense. Actually, that's a good point. I know down further south here, there definitely are programs with various conservation authorities for that sort of thing. If we're talking about species specifically, walk us through where you're standing. You mentioned several different varieties of clover. What have we got? What are we looking at here?
So some things are just naturally invasive, and like this is tufted vetch or ground vetch. You can get vetches in as a seed for cover crops. It's something where you kind of want to watch because it can become invasive. Really, for me, I'm able to keep most of my vetch in check when it creeps into the field just by having wheat in my rotation, because CPA really kind of keeps it in place. But it doesn't really take a lot of yield, and it helps fix nitrogen underneath the ground. So again, it's very case dependent. The sweet clover I talked about, this is what it looks like. You can either get red or white. And it's funny, I used to ask the local beekeepers which was the best one, and whichever one I could buy, he told me that I should have bought the other. So I think it doesn't matter. Crimson clover is one of my favorites. This is my favorite cover crop legume because it really, in Renfrew, it doesn't overwinter very well. It's got a gorgeous color. Even things like sunflowers, I have a lot of people calling saying, hey, I want to put some sunflowers up in my yard. How do I get seed? Because I'm also, I also have that available. And so for me, a lot of the time is just honestly go buy a bag of birdseed and plant it, unless you're planning on combining and harvesting it. Birdseed, anybody who feeds the birds knows that once anything that falls on the ground grows really well. It's got a nice fibrous root system. It doesn't overwinter. And I do know people who actually put it in their cover crops in the fall just because it makes the neighbors super happy. And so I just, there's not many things that make the general public excited about corn or beans, but when you put sunflowers or clover in a field, everybody's got, the warmth, it warms the cockles of their heart or whatever you want to call it.
Well, thanks, Jen. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
You've been listening to Ontario farmer and agronomist Jennifer Dolman in conversation with Matt McIntosh, a contributor for Farmtario. You're listening to Between the Rows. I'm your host this week, Dave Bedard. Next up, we have a special feature interview with our show sponsor, FarmLink Solutions. Here's Kevin Yaworski speaking with Derek Deary of FarmLink about grain marketing.
Today I'm here with Derek Deary, grain marketing specialist with FarmLink Marketing Solutions, to talk about grain marketing. So Derek, I was hoping you could explain to us exactly what grain marketing is.
Absolutely, and good day. Well, simply put, grain marketing is the technical art of selling grain. And grain marketing is really a series of informed decisions and subsequent actions that turn grain into a profit. It considers both market analysis and marketing decisions and puts you in control of your grain. So market analysis really focuses on external factors such as macro trends, local prices, and things that impact supply and demand like weather, politics, and global trends. An example we're seeing right now with the drought in Western Canada, supply is tight, demand is high, and record prices are a result. Now, marketing decisions are 100% about the farm. They are smart decisions around taking the crop producers work so hard to grow and simply turning it into cash. These decisions focus on internal factors like risk management, cash flow needs, management styles, and individual business goals.
Thank you for that overview. So now that you've given us an overview and an explanation of grain marketing, how does FarmLink help producers then market their grain?
Yeah, so at FarmLink, FarmLink exists to help every producer achieve their financial goals. Through advanced data and customer service, we really help producers make the right grain marketing decisions at the right time. We're doing our job if producers are earning what they deserve for doing their job. We believe their work is worth more. So we start by asking producers, what are your goals? And we really build it out from there. Now, some common goals that we hear are succession planning or business transitioning, of course, but then also gets into cash flow planning and budgeting for the farm. And one common goal that I really like that we hear is optimizing grain marketing decisions and farm management. Now, FarmLink offers a good, unbiased second opinion. So producers can focus on production, and we can help by focusing on grain marketing.
Thank you. What solutions does FarmLink offer producers in Western Canada?
So today we have two customizable solutions. And our first one would be our grain marketing advisor team. Our grain marketing advisors offer the one-on-one local support that will help farmers develop that customized strategy and really answer the questions, should I sell or should I wait? They will also help producers uncover and achieve their financial goals, again, such as succession planning, getting a hold of those cash flow needs, or increasing their on-farm storage. Our second solution is GrainFox. And GrainFox is our new grain marketing platform that offers winning up-to-the-minute insights and recommendations for producers that like that more do-it-yourself approach to grain marketing. GrainFox uses FarmLink's market analysis backed by a team of analysts, local grain marketing advisors, and 20 years of statistical and historical data.
So if producers are looking for more information about FarmLink and GrainFox, how do they go about looking for that information?
Sure, to start that conversation or to try GrainFox for free, they may visit farmlinksolutions.ca, visit our website. There's a section with more information on the value of working with an advisor and how GrainFox can help you market your grain like a pro. Please visit farmlinksolutions.ca.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that was Derek Deary, Grain Marketing Specialist with FarmLink Marketing Solutions.
Well, Chicago December oats have been on more or less a steady upslope for weeks now, which has provided some unusual drama for what's a usually pretty thinly traded contract. As of Tuesday night this week, December oats closed at $6.44 US. Now, on Tuesday last week, around the time when oats were crossing the $6 mark, I talked to Phil Franz Workington of Glacier Markets Farm about what, if anything, prairie oat growers should make of these developments. Phil, hi, and welcome back to the show.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. So it's Tuesday morning as we speak, and I'm seeing where December oats just recently crossed the US $6 mark. I sort of suspect I know the answer to this, but what's driving that activity?
Yeah, your suspicions are correct. I imagine it's the small crops, both here in Canada and in the U.S. So tight supplies are driving the higher prices, and adding to that is. You alluded to the thinly traded nature of the oats futures, so that when things do move, they can see a large move. Let's just say, as those smaller volumes can lead to exaggerated swings.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the prices oats futures are they're hovering around that $6 mark as we speak today, and. I looked back on the records going back 20 years. They've never been this high ever. Usually hovering around the $3 mark is a much more typical level for the oats futures market.
Now, are these this contract, is this food grade oats or feed oats?
Yeah, it's good question. I believe it's food grade oats. Most of the market in the oats is traded for the food grade.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember a few years back. I mean, there was a sudden uptick in front month oats contract, and somebody on Twitter posted an image of the chart with the caption, "Go home, oats, you're drunk." I get the impression that the oats contract it just don't get no respect. I mean, why is that?
It's just the small volumes of it. It's we grow, a few million tons of oats here in Canada, but in the States, they're, they're growing, 500,000 tons usually. That's what they grew this year, just under 500,000 tons. Last year they grew way more. They had the same issue with, in their key oat growing areas. So when you're talking 500,000 tons versus, 90 million tons of soybeans or whatever it is, there's not big volumes on it. So you get, it's different now with everything on computers, but, in the past you'd get some characters trading the oats futures and, the local guys and that kind of thing. So, but it's small volumes, and the small volumes can lead to some wilder price swings, but they keep it around because there are still people trading it. The Canadian, you used to be able to see more Canadian basis contracts related to the U.S. futures, but you don't really see that anymore. The Canadian buyers generally have their own cash bids that aren't necessarily or tied to the U.S. futures anymore. But the big guys, your Quaker Oats and whatever down in the U.S., they're still a player in the futures as far as I know. So there are commercial traders in there that are following it, and then the thin volumes allow for what speculators there are to lead to some swings, and then they have their ways to move the futures around, and they're making money on it in the small volumes, which is why the market sticks around.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, higher prices should be the silver lining in a bad crop year. But is there a way for Canadian oat growers to make money off of this situation somehow?
Well, they could. They can make their money by if they grew oats this year. The cash prices here are equally strong. The $6 to $7 in the countryside is what I've seen. So that's a similar situation. Some of the highest prices for oats on in my following of this, at least. So that there are strong prices out there. To make I guess there's a way you could use the futures as a hedge and protect yourself in some ways, but basically the underlying story this year is if you have oats, if you have any kind of crop, prices are strong, and they're available both on the cash side and in the futures.
Mm-hmm. Now, getting back to the oats, to the Chicago oats futures for a second. I gather there's sort of a mystery as to why this contract is still kept around. Even the old Winnipeg Commodity Exchange, they eventually got rid of their historic long-term oats contract, but this one just seems to keep on ticking. Yeah,
and it does keep on ticking, but it has. I was looking at it here today. There's, as we're talking now, there's just under 200 contracts in the December contract have traded today. By comparison, the nearby canola contract has 10,000 contracts traded right now. So it's very, very small. There's not much happening in there. But this is just speculation on my part now, but 194 contracts is bigger than 0 contracts. So they're not losing anything to have it there, because it's not, I don't imagine the keeping it operational is losing as long as the exchange is making money on keeping it there, they'll keep it there. So how they're making money on those small volumes is, I'm not sure, but anything higher than 0 is a profit.
I guess if you don't have a pit full of traders who are sort of standing of live action traders who are standing around trading in this too, it's a lot easier to exactly. Or a lot more cost effective to keep it around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we can keep. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say that is, it would be interesting to follow and see if what developments there are in the oats contract if it fades away eventually. But like for years the volumes have been small in oats. They've never been large. It's always been this small kind of chugging away in the background that most of you call someone up in Chicago to talk about what's happening in the markets. I can count on one hand over over a decade of talking to people there who's brought up oats to talk about. So and then when you talk to the oats traders here, or not traders, but processors and anyone buying oats in Canada, you ask them about the oats futures. They'll have an opinion because they're watching it, but then they say, but we don't really base anything off of that because it's erratic and we can't trust it. So it is a bit of a mystery, yes.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we can keep watching the cash price tables then for our oat market guidance.
There is often if the futures are going up, it's because the cash prices are going up. There is a linkage there, but it's the cash prices are leading, not the futures, generally speaking. And then if the futures go wild for whatever reason, the cash price will the basis relative to the futures will change accordingly, because they're still following their supply demand fundamentals and not so much worried about what's happening in the futures these days.
I guess we'll keep watching this drama taking place in miniature then. Phil, thanks very much for this.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Phil Franz Workington reports for Glacier Markets Farm here in Winnipeg. You're listening to Between the Rows. I'm your host this week, Dave Bedard. That's our time for the week, but we'll be back with more from the Glacier FarmMedia family of publications. And that includes our upcoming multimedia project, Seeding the Future. You'll definitely want to keep an eye out on our websites for links to that. Also, if it's more convenient for you to search us up there, an archive of past episodes of this show is now up on YouTube. If you do, just make sure to use Between the Rows Podcast as your search term and look for our logo. You've been listening to Between the Rows. I've been your host this week, Dave Bedard. Thanks for listening.
Part of being a farmer is being an accountant, and a mechanic, and a chemist. You have lots on the go. So FarmLink makes your grain marketing go further. We help you reach your financial goals with calculated sales decisions. No bias, just solutions and results. Plus, with our new app GrainFox, we bring every opportunity right to your fingertips. Literally. Start seeing the returns that'll get your family ahead. You've earned it. FarmLink. Your work is worth more. Get started at farmlinksolutions.ca.